Good late evening, YouTube world. And here's Candy the Wonder Pup, who I've enticed with a treat. You want a treat? You want a treat? Give me five. Good girl. You can't see her. She. Give me five. Yeah, there we go. All right, sit. Lay down. Come on. There you go. That'll keep her happy for a while. And she got a whole one. Normally I break it in half. It's my Scottish background. Gordon Causey, Gordy Canuck, if you follow me on Twitter, Grow a Set, if you follow me on, if we're friends on Reddit. And it's now 11:18 on Wednesday, the 18th of January. And as we speak right now, before I get going, if you like my videos, give it a like. That gives me a little dopamine rush. Ha ha ha. And if you follow, if you like the videos I'm putting out, makes for a better backdrop. If you like the videos I'm putting out, you're welcome to subscribe and you'll know when I'm going live. And I enjoy interaction. So if you want to chime in and comment, please do. So as we speak, there's the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is holding its annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland. And it started on the 16th of January and it runs through till the 20th. And I believe that's inclusive. And it surprises me. So many people seem to think of the WEF, the World Economic Forum, as some conspiracy theory when we've known about it for years. It's been around for ages. George W. Bush has been in attendance there. I believe Bill Clinton as well. Stephen Harper from Canada. Prince Charles has spoken there, although now he's King Charles. Who's meeting there? It's basically a triumvirate. It's the world's most wealthy, powerful, and influential people are all gathered there. The CEO, Boras, I forget how you pronounce his last name, the CEO of Pfizer is there. I'm sure other pharmaceutical companies are represented, media companies, the tech giants, and of course, political leaders. Canada's represented right now by Chrystia Freeland, who's our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. She's in Davos right now. It's a who's who of the world's, again, wealthy, powerful, and influential. And what are they meeting for? Well, if you went onto their website prior to the 16th, they had a countdown clock to when the meeting started, and it said about the meeting. And here's what it says, or here's what it said. It's not on there anymore. This was up prior to the meeting starting. About the meeting. The world today is at a critical inflection point. The sheer number of ongoing crises calls for bold collective action. The annual meeting will convene leaders from government, business, and civil society to address the state of the world and to discuss priorities for the year ahead. It will provide a platform to engage in constructive, forward-looking dialogues and help find solutions through public-private cooperation. That was right off the WEF's own website. And again, this is the uber wealthy, powerful, and influential from around the world. Envision that the world is undergoing multiple, not just a crisis, but there are multiple crises going on. So what are the crises, to use the proper plural term? What are these crises? Well, obviously one, whether you think it's a crisis or not, I'm sure COVID is being presented as a crisis. XBB.1.5 is the variant that seems to be getting all the press right now. And what could be coming in the wake of that? What are we going to be, seeing in response to this supposed XBB.1.5 or whatever other variant comes along? Remember, we had SARS-CoV-2, we had the Alpha, then we had the Delta, then we had the Omicron, then we had XBB, and now we have a subvariant of Omicron was a variant, and then it had a subvariant of XBB, and now we have a subvariant of a subvariant. And I've heard it described as an alphabet soup of variants now. There are so many out there. It's just a question of which one is going to, rise and become the variant of concern, or will there be more than one variant of concern? Then, of course, we have the economic uncertainty of the world. The World Health Organization or the World Bank, I forget, one of the two, have said that in the past year, an additional 350 million people have been pushed into food insecurity. We'd have another and that was on top of all the people who were starving before this year. Now we have another 350 million people, many of them children. And then, of course, we know that one of the biggest crises that they're going to be talking about is the environmental crisis. How, we're on an unsustainable path, and that major radical changes are needed if the planet is to avoid a catastrophic future. Hyperbole on steroids. They're going to try and scare us. And then, of course, we have the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. I have a tendency, I almost want to say the Soviet Union because I'm old. And then underlying all those issues, I mean, why do we have COVID? Why do we have economic issues? Why do we have environmental problems? Why are we having wars? And it's my genuine belief that when the doors are closed, when the cameras are shut off, and when the microphones are non-existent, that they talk about overpopulation. 986D, who's over in Ireland, is saying he's a bit behind. He had to put out the trash bins. The dustbins. So that, to my mind, that's what I believe. I genuinely believe that all these crises are more or less, they're not more or less, these are manufactured crises. If you want to affect radical fundamental change, you need a crisis. And in the absence of a crisis, you manufacture a crisis. What did we see with COVID? When it first broke out in China, it was verboten. My video would be taken down if I even dared to suggest the possibility that it might have come from that lab in Wuhan, China. Now you're allowed to say that. Now, Director Redfield with the CDC has stated that publicly, that he considers that to be the likely cause. U.S. intelligence services as well have said that in all likelihood, SARS-CoV-2 is an engineered virus that either intentionally or unintentionally was leaked. It came out of that lab in Wuhan, China. And who knows? That lab in Wuhan, China was working in collaboration with labs all around the world. We have a microbiology lab here in Canada, our national microbiology lab, which is in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And just prior to COVID breaking out, there were 2 or 3 individuals. I haven't read enough on it, but there was quite a lot of talk. I believe they were let go to Chinese nationals who had been working there were let go, and the circumstances around their departure from our National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg, the circumstances surrounding their departure, the government has stonewalled any attempt to find out what were the circumstances surrounding the reason why they left. Transparency? Not in our world. And Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum. And he has been, for at least the past 2 years, more like 3, almost 3 now, he's been putting forth this idea that the world is on the cusp. We are embarking on the fourth industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, which is an interesting turn of phrase because we've only had one industrial revolution. There's a futurist, I don't think he's alive anymore. His name was Alvin Toffler. He wrote a famous book called The Third Wave. And he held that society writ large, globally, that we'd gone through 2 waves. And the first wave was the agricultural wave, when human society moved from hunting and gathering, and we learned to cultivate crops and became agricultural. And that was the first wave. And then the second wave was the Industrial Revolution. And then he proposed that we were on the cusp of a third wave. And the third wave was the technological revolution, something we've been living with forever. But Klaus Schwab doesn't call it the second industrial revolution or the fourth wave. He calls it the fourth industrial revolution. And the idea he's putting forward is that that the path that we have been on for the past 500 years marching forward, that now, that the path we're on is not sustainable. Hence why the United Nations came out with their so-called sustainability goals. That if society, if the world, if the economy, if everything runs the way it has been for the past 40, 50, 60 years, if we just keep going on the same path, that it's unsustainable and that the world will suffer from all manner of deprivations. We'll go to war for water is one. And I genuinely, when I talk about the fourth industrial revolution, I talk about the Fourth Reich, because the language that Klaus Schwab uses, he refers to our current system. He says we have to transition to a new system of, and he calls it stakeholder capitalism. And the question I ask is, who are the stakeholders and who are the stakes? I contend the individuals meeting right now and who are represented in Davos, Switzerland at the WEF's annual meeting, those are the stakeholders. You and I are the stakes. They want to hold us. And I'm convinced that the ultimate end goal is to have humanity, the vast majority, 99+% of us, as being little more than the digital property of our corporate masters, administered by governments who are at the beck and call of their corporate elite masters. That would be the hierarchy. You'd have the corporate elite, government doing the corporate elite's bidding, and then the vast rest of majority, and we're little more than digital property. And we're seeing this happen in the world all around us right now. Everyone has outsourced their brain to device, to a smartphone. Our phones are smart. We're not. For what it's worth, this is a 2013 or 14. It's either an S3 or an S4 Galaxy phone with no data, zero apps. I don't have one single app on this, which makes me an utter, complete, and total dinosaur in today's world, because everything is based on an app. You go to the grocery store and they have one price, but if you download our app and answer 783 questions, you can save 50 cents on a loaf of bread or whatever. And they'll have two prices up. And I refuse to play the game, which means I have to pay more. And people think I'm crazy because call me a conspiracy theorist if you want. But yeah, I'm saving 50 cents on the loaf of bread. But what I'm paying is I am handing over, and they already know everything about me anyway. I mean, I don't begrudge anyone who goes along with the game and plays the game and answers all the questions and downloads the app. But that's I haven't gone across that river yet. I'm still looking across to the other side and saying, nah, I don't want to go across that river. So when you want to institute fundamental radical change, I said this earlier, if a crisis isn't there, you manufacture one. And we saw that with COVID. When COVID happened, when COVID broke out in March of 2020, the Imperial College of London, which is as prestigious a school as you could want to find, it's one of the pillars of academia, they put out a paper. They had what was called their coronavirus response team, and they modeled the United States and Great Britain, and they made predictions that were based on incredibly faulty assumptions, a very high mortality rate, and they were predicting that a country, the United States, was supposed to have 2 million deaths as a direct result of COVID within the first 12 months. 1 million minimum, as many as 2 million. It all depended on whether they introduced what they refer to in the report as NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions. And that is just a fancy word for lockdowns. Don't lock down, 2 million will die. Lock down, only 1 million will die. And they said that Western countries, developed Western countries, could expect commensurate results based on population with some variance allowed for age and strength of the healthcare system. And so in Canada, 38 million people, give or take, that would have meant in the first year, just in the first year of COVID, somewhere around the neighborhood of 100,000 deaths as a direct result of COVID. We didn't come anywhere near that. Basically, 80% of the deaths were being reported for the first year or so of the pandemic. 80% of the deaths, we were told, were happening in long-term care facilities where people go when they're old, sick, and typically terminally ill. Suffering from 75% of the population is already suffering from circulatory and cardiovascular diseases. It's an incredibly weak and frail population. But they created a crisis. 100,000 Canadians are going to die 200,000 if we don't do anything. We can save 100,000 lives if we lock down. And I know that a lot of people will make the point that the United States, that their numbers were exponentially higher. They're significantly higher. The number of COVID deaths recorded in the United States on a per capita basis was much higher than what we saw in Canada. But there's an important distinction to be made. In the United States, Medicare, which is government-funded health care, they do have a degree of socialized medicine in the United States. If you're over the age of 65, you qualify for Medicare, which is government-funded health insurance. And regardless of age, though, Medicare, the federal agency, Medicare would give any healthcare provider, any hospital, and remember, hospitals in the United States are typically for profit. If you diagnosed a patient with COVID, 10 grand, in and around 10 grand. I read an article in ABC News quoting a Minnesota state senator, and he was saying that for the state of Minnesota, for his jurisdiction, it was around $9,000, and that the payout varied. Different parts of the country got different amounts depending on the cost structure within their area. So New York City would be higher than Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I imagine. But somewhere around $10,000, 9,000, maybe 11, 12. So to make it simple, just say somewhere around $10,000 for every patient diagnosed with COVID. So someone comes in suffering from terminal cancer, stage 4, inoperable cancer. Well, there's no money for that. Aside, you can get if it's an insured individual, you get that money. But if you also add COVID to the diagnosis, well, then bang, you get an extra 10 grand. And then likewise, if that COVID patient at some point was put onto a ventilator, then Medicare would pay around $30,000. Again, quoting that ABC News article I read, quoting a Minnesota state senator. In Minnesota, it was $29,000. So the healthcare system, profit-driven for the most part in the United States, was provided with incentives by the federal government to diagnose patients with COVID and to put them on ventilators. And I don't know the statistics. Nothing in these videos is to be construed as medical advice, and I don't make any claims to be an expert. But my understanding is that the survival rate once someone is put onto a ventilator is very low. I've got 986D saying an undertaker from the UK had some very interesting things to say about the vivid deaths. John O'Looney is his name. 986D shared with me in Reddit, where we both engage, a video, and I wish you would type the gentleman's name if you would. A doctor from the UK, I believe he's a doctor or a medical researcher. And I just recently saw a compilation of his videos going all the way back to August, September of 2020 through to current. And he started out as a big proponent of the jabs. He was like, the science is unequivocal. I don't go down conspiracy theories. I don't address conspiracy theories. These are proven, safe, and effective. Everyone, and he was all on board. And then he had an evolution. Sometime in, I don't know whether it was in 2021 or 2022, all of a sudden he was apologizing for his earlier videos. And I wanted to share an article that was written in Canada's CBC. That's Canada. That's the equivalent of Britain's BBC. BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Like the BBC, the CBC is government funded to the tune, I know it's over $1 billion a year. And 986D has just put up the gentleman's name. You can find him on YouTube. His name is Dr. John Campbell. Yeah, his change of mind is very telling, is what 986D is saying. Anyway, CBC wrote this article, and given that it's a government-funded news source, and seeing the amount of propaganda that has been put out by the CBC, and there's no other word for it. It is pure, it's out and out propaganda. Back in 2022, on July 1st, on Canada Day, CBC reported that the world's largest cricket protein processing plant in the world had just about to open in and around the city of London, Ontario. And they wrote an article all about the urgent need for the human population to transition away from meat-based protein to other sources of protein, and suggesting that crickets would be one, and about the fact that the population of cows, flatulating cows, farting cows, how this was impacting climate change and how we urgently needed to transition. They quoted a professor from the University of Guelph, which is one of Canada's most preeminent universities with respect to agriculture, farming, and cattle. And so they were presenting, we need to transition. And that was then taken, and a lot of social media commentators, myself being one of them, said, look, this is the plan. Get us off meat, get us onto other sources of protein like crickets. And then CBC wrote an article saying unfounded conspiracy theory says that there's a move to transition people away from meat-based protein to other forms like crickets. And well, it's a conspiracy theory. You just wrote an article about it less than a month and a bit ago. It was less than 2 months ago. You wrote an article on it stating it as fact, and now you're calling it a conspiracy theory. This is our CBC. Another one I've referenced frequently. Amina, hi Gordon, and I'm doing very well. I'm working. I got out to a hockey game the other night with my youngest. I mentioned I was doing more of a faith-based video a couple nights ago, and something I'd been struggling with, and I'm doing much better because life goes on. Got out to a hockey game, watched what they call the AHL, American Hockey League, which is the league below the NHL. So you don't have to mortgage your house to get a ticket. Anyway, so as I was saying, now what was I saying? Someone remind me. Oh yeah, the CBC. This one blew my mind. They presented in Edmonton, CBC, the affiliate in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, showed an image of a patient hooked up to a ventilator, and that patient, eagle-eyed observers of the news, noticed that it was not a human being. The CBC was showing a mannequin. And they didn't disclose that this is a mannequin. They were presenting it as an actual patient, human being. And when they got out, when eagle-eyed observers went public, and it goes all over social media, check out the patient in ICU the CBC is showing us. It's a mannequin. Well, then the director for that news outlet in Edmonton came forward and issued a public apology saying that it was a mistake, he said. It was an error in judgment. And I'm sorry to swear, but I call bullshit, because take Media Ethics 101. And if you want to present a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator in an ICU unit, well, go ahead and disclose it and say, we're showing you the following image, which is of a mannequin, which is meant to give an indication of what a patient hooked up would look like. However, this is a mannequin. You do that, it's ethical. You don't do that, and it's unethical. Hence why the director of their news outlet in Edmonton had to apologize. So when CBC comes out with anything, I'm like, looking at it half sideways. But I did read the article regardless, and it was about a Quebec man. Quebec is the second largest by population province in Canada. Quebec man's COVID vaccine story spurs others to come forward. And this was posted by CBC News on January 17th, 2023, 4 a.m. Last updated, same date. And it says the story of a Gatineau, Quebec man who developed a debilitating skin condition after receiving a COVID-19 vaccine has struck a chord with many Canadians, dozens of whom reached out to share their own similar experiences. Shortly after, and this name is so hard to pronounce, it sounds like he's First Nations probably, Tisir, T-I-S-I-R, Otabachi, received his second dose in August of 2021. A burning rash that had started on his hand spread to his limbs and back, forcing him to quit his jobs and seek medical treatment in Ontario. Otabachi is now seeking redress through Quebec's vaccine injury compensation program. And then here's where I do take exception. This is what they wrote. According to the Public Health Agency of Canada, only a tiny fraction, 0.011%, of the more than 95 million vaccine doses administered in this country as of December 9th resulted in serious adverse reaction. But that's still more than 10,000 reported cases. I think the math here is completely out to lunch, because they're saying it's 0.11%, 0.011% of the more than 95 million vaccine doses administered. Well, 95 million is the wrong denominator. Canada is not a nation of 95 million people. We're a nation of roughly 38 million. And we're told that 80% of the population has been dosed has gotten at least the first primary, the two. And about half of those, as I understand it, have had third, fourth, and maybe fifth shots. Some tapped out after 2, some after 3, some after 4, some are still on the train and they're rolling up their sleeve every, I don't know how many months it is. But if you take 80% of 38 million, you come to 30.4 million. And if you multiply 30.4 million, that's the number of Canadians who supposedly have rolled up their sleeves. I want to talk about that a bit too. But if you take 0.011% of that number, you've got 33,440. So if the severe adverse event rate is in point of fact 0.011, if that, well then of jabbed people in Canada, we've had 33,440. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what the numbers indicate. And CBC, in reporting that over 10,000, well, if they know it, if it is in fact 33,440 or more, 33,000 plus, well, saying more than 10,000, you're not lying. You're off by a factor of 300%, but you're not lying, because if you say over 10,000, well, 33,000 is over 10,000. But the article has some more illuminating information. Otabachi, this is the guy with the severe skin reaction, who had never experienced any skin problems before, told CBC that throughout his ordeal, most of the doctors who examined him dismissed the possibility of any link between the vaccine and the sudden onset of his painful condition. So the question I have to ask is, okay, if we have 0.011% of vaccinated Canadians are experiencing severe adverse reactions, what about the people whose doctors aren't accepting that there's even the potential of a link to the vaccine they took? Not me, but someone I know firsthand, a member of my extended family who's 38 years old, 6 foot tall, 180 pounds, incredibly fit and healthy, has something of a fitness studio in his basement, eats incredibly healthy, stuff like eggplant. And if anyone should be having a heart attack, it's me. I'm older than him. I'm shorter and bigger. You know, I'm just under 6 foot tall, and I'm 215, 220. And I eat meat like crazy. If anyone should be suffering a heart attack, it's me, not this member of my extended family. So he had a heart attack, and when we spoke about it, I said, "You just had the booster, didn't you?" And he said, "Oh, the doctor." Oh, jeez! Come get a treat. My dog loves blues. Candy, come here and get a treat. 2 seconds. Candy the Wonder Pup goes up on the lap until the walking dog passes. And I'm getting quite a few more comments. 986D is saying, look into John O'Looney. He also talks about what has been found in people's blood. It's not like normal clots. It's crazy. He even has jars of stuff. Fascinating. And Lorenzo is saying, hi, everyone. Are we live? Mic check 1, 2. Yes, Lorenzo, we are live. Apologize, my dog. Hopefully she's not going to scream and bark. She's just gone to the window to look out. And now, of course, I entirely lose my train of thought thanks to Candy the Wonder Pup. Let me take a drink of my coffee and collect my thoughts. I was talking about a member of my extended family. I don't like to get too specific because there is the potential I'm very public. This YouTube channel is branded under, or it's under my own name, my real name. I've had family members, people get mad. I've had other members of my extended family have, there have been 2 strokes. And even the suggestion that a possible link is dealt with, it's anger that I have to deal with. Verbally aggressive anger. And Lorenzo saying, found you randomly on YouTube because I don't like what's going on at Davos. None of us do. And unless you're a multi-billionaire, member of a royal family, politician, for the great unwashed, it's not going to be good news coming out of Davos. But I was getting onto the point about how members of my own family, and if you dare suggest a connection between that stroke and the jab, they're mad. And I equate it, and 986D might appreciate this because, as I understand it, he's in Ireland and an Irish Catholic, or at least raised that way he was. He wrote that down once in one of our chats. But you'll remember when the stories of abuse first started coming out of the Catholic Church, when priests and brothers and senior members of the Roman Catholic Church were being accused of sexually abusing children. Did people get mad at the church? No, they got mad at the people making the accusations. They got mad at the victims. Sinead O'Connor famously went on to Saturday Night Live. I forget what year it was. I'm still a bit of a Sinead O'Connor fan. Anyway, Sinead O'Connor went on Saturday Night Live and she sang a reworked version of Bob Marley's song War. And at the end of it, she tore up a picture of Pope John Paul II and said, fight the real enemy. And and this was the first time. She was like, if she wasn't the first, she was one of the very first to bring to light the abuse that was happening to children within Roman Catholic parishes, and rotating pedophilic priests around. And people, instead of getting mad at the church, got, how dare you accuse that priest? How dare you? How dare you suggest that the wonderful, life-saving, safe, and effective vaccines could have anything? It's I don't know how exactly to put it into words, but people are so indoctrinated that I follow the science. No, you don't. You're following scientists. Science is a process, and it's slow, incredibly slow, meticulous. So what can we expect coming out of Davos? Genuinely, we're seeing an explosion. Now we have an article that I'm quoting here out of CBC enumerating cases of people having severe adverse reactions to the jabs, and also publicly stating the fact that when these individuals go to medical professionals, to their doctors, that the possible link is dismissed out of hand. So, and in our unscientific world, people want a consensus. They want to be told what to think and how to feel about things. And that's what I think they're meeting about in Davos right now with respect to a number of things, COVID among them. And I think they're going to craft the consensus view, because people think consensus equals truth. The consensus view is that the COVID vaccinations will stop infections and they will stop transmissions. That was the consensus scientific view, we were told. It was also wrong. There was a member, an executive with Pfizer, who was grilled by the European Parliament, and she was asked, did you test to see if the vaccines stopped transmissibility, if they stopped transmission of the virus? And this executive with Pfizer said, we didn't have time. We were moving at the speed of science. And got that, the part of that quote that's true, she said, we were moving at, quote, the speed of science, suggesting we're going so fast that she was suggesting that the speed of science is warp speed. Well, no, the speed of science is not warp speed. The speed of science is molasses. Science done properly is slow. Just going to read what I watched. Talking about Sinead O'Connor, she's had a rough time lately. Her son killed himself maybe a year ago, and very sad. She said she won't sing again. Anyway, that was Sinead O'Connor. I watched some of the raw videos posted on their official, this is Lorenzo saying, I watched some of the raw videos posted on their official YouTube channel, and let me tell you, that's disgusting what they're planning and already doing. We've got Yuval Noah Harari, who is Klaus Schwab's #1, kind of his right-hand man, top advisor, and he's openly, he'll put it right out there, and he can put it right out there because the vast majority of the population, one, doesn't want to hear it, or two, they're not even listening. I've got to watch my footy game. Liverpool is playing Manchester, and Liverpool's going to win because I'm a Scouser. You know, I don't care about the WEF. Who cares? In the United States, you know, who's going to win the Super Bowl? In Canada, who's going to win the Stanley Cup? And people don't pay attention. And so he can put it right out there. He can tell the world, oh yeah, human beings, you're all useless. The most people on this planet, according to Yuval Noah Harari, are useless. He's echoing a term used by Boris Johnson's father, where we're referred to as useless eaters. That's you, that's me. We're the useless eaters. If we're not in Davos, Switzerland, or at least dialed in somehow, we're among the useless class. And Noah Yuval Harari is saying that, you know, this idea that humans have a soul and rights and all this, that's over. That's over. That's history. That's gone. He says human beings are now hackable animals. And we are approaching a time when we will be able to download your dream data, where your dreams will be uploaded to the cloud and then someone can just hack in and see what you've been dreaming about. You talk about the ability to control a population. It's Orwellian, it's 1984, it's Big Brother on steroids. I just want to catch up on what's being written. Lorenzo says, yes, the speed of science. I watched that clip. Lorenzo again. Yes, Yuval Noah Harari. He's written the name. So if you're looking at the chat and you don't know, typically you can just go onto YouTube and just type YUVALNOH and it'll populate the rest for you. Technology is so wonderful. And 9860 is saying, come on the pool. Ha, I'm not sure what that means. What the pool, or come into the pool, come jump in the pool with the rest of us. So I believe there's a strong potential that coming out of Davos, they're going to have a consensus view as to why there's this sudden explosion in severe adverse events, severe adverse events, and young people dying. And I believe what we're going to be told, if I had to guess, I believe what they're going to tell us, rinse and repeat. They're going to say it's the bad unvaccinated people that provided a large pool of receptible hosts for SARS-CoV-2 to mutate and to create these more virulent and more transmissible strains like Omicron, like XBB, like XBB.1.5. And 9860, I have no idea about footy. I hardly watch any sports anymore. A gentleman I work with gave me free tickets to go see an AHL hockey game. Again, that's minor league, one below the NHL. And so I took my youngest. He's in grade 4. And, got to get some joy out of life. And for me, seeing him get joy out of life gives me joy. I just called on Liverpool because I do a decent Liverpool accent. I know how to go at the end of every sentence. It's annoying. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Anyway, so that's on the COVID front. I fully expect them to I can't say for sure. I don't know. I'm not there. So I'm guessing. I'm grasping at straws, but I think there's the potential for them to say that the reason for XBB 1.5 and all these other highly transmissible strains is because if everyone had taken the jabs, because in Canada, we're probably up around 5-6 million people who haven't taken a shot. And our rate is higher than the United States. I think we're similar to Europe. And, so you're looking at tens, hundreds of millions of people in the Western developed world who haven't taken the jabs. And that's where this great reset, fourth industrial revolution, Fourth Reich, as I call it, we're the tip of the spear. I think Australia and New Zealand are closer to the actual tip than Canada. I think Canada's somewhat next in line. Europe and then the United States is where they're going to have the hardest time. States like Texas and South Dakota and Florida in particular. But so I expect this is what I'm expecting, and that this will be used as impetus to try and force boosters on people and to get the so-called hesitant among us. Amina is saying she likes my impressions, my accents. Anyway, but I also think, I think they're running scenarios. I think they're using artificial intelligence. And there's a company called Cambridge Analytics, which is said to have 5,000 or more data points on just about every man, woman, and child in the Western developed world by scanning social media and everything. And they know what we're thinking. They know how we will react. And I think they would anticipate that there's going to be pushback. And so nothing beats a good crisis like putting another crisis on top of it. And the most obvious candidate in my mind is an economic crisis. We've already seen inflation. They say in Canada, I was just reading January's food inflation. So the cost of just food, they kind of the consumer price index takes like a grocery basket of everyday items that people typically buy and then measures inflation. And according to the official results, we experienced 10% official inflation in January. So that's year over year. Problem with my British accent, right, is I start off, I'm great, to a point. Like right now, it's kind of Cockney. I'm East End London, but then I go all over the place. I start going up to Manchester. Before you know it, I've got a broad northern accent, and the next thing you know, I'm all the way up in Liverpool, and I'm going up at the end of every sentence, and it's so I'm all over the map when it comes to British. I like my German accent better. It's more fun to be Klaus Schwab. Wouldn't that be something? No, thank you. So we getting back on topic, really enjoying this. Has been a lot of fun. So all of you, Lorenzo 986D, Amina, thank you so much. So we've got the COVID crisis, which they can use, I think, to push the jabs and the boosters. Then you get an economic crisis, and nothing can distract people more than worrying about paying their mortgage, paying their rent, putting gas in the car. And in Canada, and I don't know where. I know 98060 is in Ireland, but Lorenzo and Amina, I don't know where you guys are from. But in Canada, there's Loblaws Corporation. They're a major, I think they're the #1 grocery store chain in Canada. Then there's Metro, and I think Metro is #2. And then there's Sobeys, and they might be #3. And they have each has their brands. Like there are other stores, but they typically fall under one of those umbrellas. And so I've got Lorenzo from Long Beach, California. Oh, very nice. I'm not gonna, dude, it's been ages since I've done my California. Oh, awesome. All right. So we've got all these, grocery stores, right? I'm they've got what we call in-store brands. I got to stop. They've got all these different brands, and each store has its discounted brand. For Loblaws, they call it No Name. Simple. Sobeys calls it Our Compliments. I don't know what Metro is called, but they all have their in-store brands. And Loblaws in October of 2021, so just this October past, they announced that in a magnanimous gesture and to help fight food inflation, we are going to hold the line on our no-name branded merchandise until January 31st. So you will see no price increases on no-name branded merchandise until February. Aren't we wonderful? And then spokespeople for Metro and for Sobeys came out and said, that's standard industry practice. We all freeze our prices on in-store brands over the holiday season and through January, and then we raise prices in February. You're not doing anything no one else does. But what that tells you is that the potential for significant inflation to hit come February. I'm already talking to friends, and I don't know whether I'm going to be right on this or not, but I figure forewarned is forearmed, and to maybe load up a bit. But eventually, how much food can you store? 3 months, 6 months? Eventually, it's going to hit you. And Amina is asking, given that I used to be in the Canadian military, what my perspective is on the Ukraine war. Honestly, a pox on both their houses. I don't. There are no winners in war. either, and people are the, everyone wants to assign who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. There are no good guys. The first casualty of war is the truth. And we've seen that in spades during this conflict. Of course, we're being conditioned, programmed, taught to believe that Ukraine is the good guys, Russia is the bad guys. Is Russia engaging in disinformation and propaganda? Of course they are. Is Ukraine and Ukraine's allies, are they engaging in disinformation and propaganda? Of course they are. War is big business. And so my attitude toward the whole thing is a pox on both their houses. I know a bit about Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and you look at Yugoslavia and you look at Ukraine and Poland, and these regions have conflicts that have been going back centuries, over 1,000 years, and they hate each other. The ethnic hatred that exists between Slavs and this group and that group, and Ukrainians and Poles, and they hate each other, and they don't need justification. They just hate each other. And it's interesting when you come from a North American perspective, you have a hard time wrapping your head around this ancestral hate that exists in so many different parts of the world, where they have a much longer history. The Irish, 986D, between the Protestants and the Catholics. It's insane. Brothers and sisters in Christ. But because one follows Rome and one follows, the Reformation, they kill each other. It's, like I say, on this side of the pond, it's sometimes hard to wrap your head around. So I got to wrap this up. I've been going on way too long. But I really appreciate you guys jumping in like this. You've made it a lot of fun for me, and I appreciate it. So we've got the COVID, we've got an economic crisis, then we've got the environmental crisis, which is the biggest crock of garbage. This idea that there are too many people on the planet and that we're consuming too much stuff, that our carbon footprints. And so it's an excuse to introduce more levels of draconian control. They're introducing smart cities into Great Britain. They're putting up bollards to restrict people's movements, to reduce carbon footprint. And that's just a smoke screen. And Amina kind of summarized it well. Inflation, vaccines, war, economy, collapse, what's left behind? My genuine belief is that they're trying to orchestrate an orderly takedown. Everything's being done incrementally, with the hope that we won't even notice what's going on. And Lorenzo is saying the climate hoax is the Davos 2023 main theme. I agree and disagree with you, Lorenzo, and I'll tell you why. I agree with you that front and center, that's what they talk about. They talk about the climate disaster. They want us scared over climate. However, I think the underlying, the unspoken of theme is how do we get rid of 6 billion people and maybe even 7.5 billion people. I go back and forth between, I've read a University of Texas study that showed that they proposed to prove, and this has been done by other academic institutions as well, that over the long term, the Earth, the planet, only produces enough energy, food, and resources in a year to sustain 1.9 billion people over the long term. And that the reason we can get to 8 billion, they say, is because heretofore, we've been tapping into the planet's reserves. The planet had enormous reserves that, were built up, and that we've been drawing down on those reserves, and now those reserves are pretty much gone. and that if we, by the year 2030, unless the population is dramatically reduced, that we're going to go to war over water. So I think it's, and Lorenzo was saying, I agree. I think we agree with each other. It's about, what's talked about and what's, they can't come out openly and say our goal is to reduce the human population by 6 billion or by 7.5 billion. The Georgia Guidestones, famously Elberton, Georgia, had as their number one guiding principle to maintain human population under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Some words to very similar effect. And going forward, the best I think that we can hope to do, I have faith to fall back on. I label my videos one of two things. I have two main labels. One is TATB, talking about the Bible, hashtag TATB. And the other one is live and unscripted. This is a live and unscripted, but my faith comes out into my live and unscripted. I can't deny who I am and to whom I belong. And faith tries to answer the question of, where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going? In a nutshell, faith tries to answer the questions of the meaning of life. And if you're devoid of that kind of direction, the times coming are going to be incredibly challenging. And without faith to fall back on, I'm not going to go any further than that, because I recognize that most of the world is secular and holds no truck with biblical teaching or any of that. I do. I'm just going to read before I leave. Gordon, before you go, do you ever have this kind of talk with your family members, friends, random people at your local supermarket? If yes, what's their response, reply, answer, or counter arguments? Had a conversation today. I won't say I talked to everyone about this, but I do talk to a lot of people. I was at work. I don't like to mention where I work. But it's a large retail establishment. I've mentioned before, I was in the military, Canadian military, until June of 2021. Didn't work for pretty much a year. I went back to work May of 2022. And I was at work, and an older gentleman born in, I think he said he was born in 1956. No. 1946. I'm not sure. He was in his 70s, and he was German. He was born in Germany. His name was Ralph. And we started talking, and there was this interesting feeling out process about how do this kind of little dance that takes place. And we quickly found out that we were in pretty much lockstep agreement about everything, as it turns out, this gentleman owns and operates a private long-term care facility, a private nursing home type facility, basically God's waiting room. I think Amina used that term. And I threw out something to him, given that he was German. He'd emigrated to Canada when he was very young, but he came from a German background. I asked him if during the Hitler's so-called final solution, the Nazis' so-called final solution, I asked him if did the people know? Did people know what was going on? Did people know what was happening at those concentration camps, at Treblinka, at Auschwitz, at Dachau? And I told them, I said, I believe they did. I believe they did know. But that the reality, the horror of what was happening was just too mind-blowingly evil to confront. And so they pretended they didn't know. He said, you need to be careful. He said, I asked my dad about this. And he said they didn't know. And I said, yeah, but was it that they didn't know or they didn't want to know? Because I was comparing it to the situation now with the jabs. And people don't want to know. As I said earlier, I've got two family members. They've gotten mad at me for suggesting that the strokes that have happened to family members of mine. Well, how long after the booster? That didn't have anything to do with the thing. And I'm a conspiracy theorist. Is now on my the 38-year-old. Is more or less, he doesn't mind talking about it, but he's, I would say, so distracted by the world that, well, if it was, it was, but my doctor says it wasn't, so that's good enough. And he doesn't get mad. Evening. And older gentleman. And we were just talking while I was at work. And I told him I'm unjabbed. And he said, he told me I got it. And we talked. So I bring it up, and it depends on the person. It depends on the person with whom I'm speaking. I think I like to be, I consider myself a reasonably self-aware person. And I think I present myself well. I believe I come across as a reasonably articulate, somewhat educated individual. And I don't believe that I present myself as I think people are genuinely surprised when I come out and red pill them. They're surprised, stunned. I was playing tennis in 2021, probably May or June of 2021, May, June, July. And there was a woman there, Anu, who's British, by the way. And we're playing tennis, and it was mixed doubles night. And we were the first two to arrive at the courts. So we're there, we're walking out in the courts, putting our stuff down on the tables and getting our rackets out. And Anu was she was in a super happy mood. And I'm like, oh, you're in a good mood. And she goes, oh, I just got my second shot. And I was like, oh, okay, good for you. And she said, have you had your second yet? And I don't like to lie. It just runs against my character. I said, Anu, I haven't even had the first. And she said, why not? And I said, oh, God. I said, do you have an hour? And she goes, oh, no, what? You're not one of those, are you? And I looked and I said, I guess I am. And she said, no, but tell me why. And I said, all right, I said that this is going back May, June, July, I forget, 2021. I said, all right, I'll give you one reason. I said, the trials aren't even finished yet. She said, that's not true. I said, see? So if you go, I said, I've invested in biotech stocks for years. I know how the clinical trial process works. I know where to check. You go to clinicaltrials.gov. It's a US government website. It's the repository for every clinical trial, for every pharmaceutical being investigated by the FDA, being oversaw by the FDA. I said, you can go to clinicaltrials.gov, look at Moderna, look at Pfizer, and you'll see that their trials aren't even finished yet. They're not going to finish until next year. October for Moderna's, October 2023, and I think it was December 2023 for Pfizer's, and both of those dates have been now pushed forward, estimated study completion dates. And she said, but they're approved. And I went, well, they're not approved, they're authorized. Canada, we authorize them. US, they call it an EUA, emergency use authorization. That allows them to administer them even though they are not approved. And she goes, but they're just like every other vaccine. And then I went, see? I said, this is why I need an hour. mRNA is a platform that's never been used before. It's been studied for 20 years and they never got out of the trial process. And I just dropped it because she's already had her too. And then Amina is asking, I'm going to make this the last question because I've never gone over an hour on one of these. but it's because you guys have been amazing. Do you think this is all related to eschatology? There's a $50 word for theologians. End times theology, eschatology. Yes, I do. I'll I do believe that when you get into biblical eschatology, end times theology, there are two ways it's looked at. There are end times, and then there are the end times. Are we going through an end time? Absolutely. I'm 100% convinced this is an end time. It's an open question over whether this is the end time. There was an end time for Israel, 70 AD. The Romans, the Jewish diaspora, where they basically kicked everyone out, Masada and the whole rest. There's that, that was an end time. There was an end time for the kingdoms of Israel and Judah when they were conquered by either the Assyrians or the Babylonians. There was an end time. Is this the end time? Open question. And now I've got Clay. I wish I could keep my composure when talking about the RNA crap. Yeah, I hear you. Thanks for sharing these personal stories. And thank you for the encouragement. Appreciate it. And I'll be doing another one. I'll be doing one on faith, talking about the Bible. I'll get more into things like eschatology. I want to give a bit of hope. I mainly want to target it towards people who don't know the gospel, because Christians, we're our own worst enemy. and that's because we can be so frickin' arrogant and so condescending and so mean. And it bugs my dad's favorite expression when I was growing up. He always say that, but my dad didn't swear, but the one he would swear, that bugs my ass. And it bugs my ass. Not all, just yesterday, I went out for a coffee with the pastor from my church, who's an amazing gentleman. We had a great talk. So anyway, thank you all so much. Appreciate it. It's now 12:30 at night. So I am working tomorrow, but not until the afternoon. So God bless Lorenzo, Amina, Clay, and 986D. If you give me permission on Reddit, I'll say your name, because that's 986D takes too long. God bless everyone. Good night.